and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 314, and today's date is March 14th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Next False Flag Will Black Out Most of the Country. And we can see what is happening. We've been having many reports about the power grid, the infrastructure, about the financial institutions, and how we are completely not protected from what is coming. And we're going to get into that a little bit later in this report. But let's start out with the economic collapse news. We're going to head out to Spain right now. And again, as we know, Europe is in a recession/depression. It is not getting better whatsoever. And right now, official figures show Spain's public debt has soared to a new record high last year, despite numerous budget-cutting measures. And we get it. They are not going to get out of this, along with France, along with Italy, Greece, Cyprus, and it's spreading to other European countries. They are everything there is getting worse. And again, what we're seeing right now is that the debt in Spain right now reached 93.9% of Spain's GDP in 2013. Last year, their debt was at 86%. So it is continually going up because when the IMF, the European Union, decides to give Spain more debt, they have to cut jobs, they have to cut programs, and this does not work out well. They cannot increase revenue. People don't have work. People have a very rough time making ends meet. And right now, what we're seeing is that the Spaniards, along with all the other countries, are staging protests against the government, against their spending cuts, arguing that austerity measures have resulted in more job losses in recent years. And there's about 4.8 million Spaniards right now that are unemployed as of January. Now, we all understand here in the United States that everything here is a complete illusion. And we can see that, they manipulate the numbers, they manipulate GDP, they manipulate unemployment, they manipulate inflation, they go back, to in time, and they recalculate all the numbers to make it fit their illusion. But right now, the consumer confidence is completely plummeting at this point. So what are we seeing right now? Well, they expected an 82.2 number. The number has come in as 79.9, and it looks like the outlook fell by its most in 5 months at this time. And again, consumer confidence, when people are looking out there, they don't have the income coming in, they don't have the disposable income, and they see on the news that all these layoffs are coming, and they're hearing rumblings in their offices that layoffs are coming, and especially those people who have been laid off already or have been looking for work for a very long time, confidence is going to continually go down again. We have to remember, this is showing up in the retail market, this is showing up in the housing market, and we can see that things are not getting better at all. And right now what we're seeing is Intel is going to be laying off 400 more people. Office Max is looking to lay off people and close more stores. Barclays just came out and they said, you know what? Because of our investment bank, the fixed income area, it's not doing well. And I reported on this a couple days ago where Goldman Sachs came out with their analysis, and they're looking at a 25% decline, and we're going to see major layoffs in the financial industry. Well, Barclays is going to be laying off more people than they thought. They expected to cut 12,000 jobs across the bank this year. It could go higher. They already cut 7,650 jobs last year, so this does not look good. And again, we're going to see many more financial institutions come forward, and we're going to see them start to lay off quite a bit of people. Now, Fed Fisher was out there, and this makes me kind of nervous. He's out there saying that U.S. housing is on a sustainable rebound. Now, didn't we hear this back in 2007 and 2008 from Bernanke? Didn't we hear him say the subprime is contained, that housing doesn't decline, that housing is going to continually to rise? And back in January of 2008, didn't he say that the Fed is not forecasting a recession whatsoever? Well, he was wrong on every single one of those points. And now they are saying this. This is telling me that we're headed for a complete collapse. But he went on and he also said consumer spending and jobs data from the third quarter suggests the U.S. recovery is proceeding steadily. Really? The consumer spending and jobs data, he's thinking and he's spreading this propaganda out there that everything's fine. But IBM laying off 13,000 people, Dell laying off 15,000, JP Morgan 8,000, Qantas 5,000, RBS 30,000, Sony 5,000, Macy's 2,500, JC Penney 2,500, and there are many, many other layoffs, big layoffs. So what jobs data? You mean the manipulated jobs data? Well, let's look at the spending. Well, if people are spending so much, wouldn't stores be expanding? Why is Staples closing 225 stores? Why is Macy's closing 5? Target 12. J.C. Penney, 33 stores. Sbarro, 155 just declared bankruptcy. Barnes & Noble closing stores. Build-A-Bear closing stores. So why are all these places closing if people are spending more money and unemployment continually comes down? Because these numbers are a complete illusion. This is not real whatsoever. Now we understand that the housing market is also an illusion. It is not real. It's completely made up. It was pumped up by the Fed. And how do we know this? Well, it's very simple. First of all, the Fed, yes, tapered back on the amount of toxic real estate that they've been purchasing from the banks, and they're still doing it. It's not $45 billion right now. Of course, now it's like $35 or $30 billion worth of purchases that they're making each month from the banks. But that's not all. Back in September, October, we understand that Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, they were all laying off people in their mortgage departments, and they are continually laying off people in their mortgage departments. And we also have to understand that the American people, since 2008, most of the homes were in foreclosure or short sales. Credit was ruined. People were laid off. They couldn't find jobs. Or if they did find a full-time job, it wasn't the same pay. And those people who couldn't find that full-time job are working 1, 2, 3 part-time jobs. And right now, we have to think of the first-time home buyer. There is no way the youth of America are going to pick up the slack. Why? Because they're coming out of college. They have a huge amount of student loans, and the government looked at the student loan and see most of the youths coming out of college can't pay it back. And what have they done? They allowed the students to modify their loans. Some of them were able to defer them. Some had their loans modified so their payments were smaller. But also, the first-time buyer segment of the market has historically averaged about 40% of the total home buyer demand. In 2013, that percentage slipped to 38%. Now, it has slipped further, and this is coming from the National Association of Realtors. It has slipped and plunged to 27%. And again, this is continually dropping because they can't find work. They're living with their parents just to pay for their student loans and to maybe pay for their car just to get to that part-time job. So they are not going to pick up the slack whatsoever. It is completely impossible. And the labor force participation rate for the Americans in their 20s hit a record low in 2013 of 75.5%. They will not be the foundation of the United States. They will not help the retail industry. They will not help the real estate industry. They will not help at this point. And their dreams that this is going to really work out well, and I'm saying the government and the Fed, is a dream. It will not, and they know it. But they're putting out the propaganda, trying to make everyone believe that everything is fine. So again, in the Economic Collapse blog, they came out with an article saying that the U.S. consumer is tapped out. And yes, consumers are tapped out. Let's look at some of the reasons why they're tapped out. Real disposable income in the U.S. experienced the largest year-over-year decline that we've seen since 1974. Disposable income decreases. Major retailers are closing thousands of stores all over the country, which we talked about a lot. Fewer Americans are applying for mortgage these days. Again, we look at the real estate industry, mortgage applications down 66% at this point. Most of the houses that are being purchased are done by cash, 60% of them by hedge fund and investing companies to pump up the prices in real estate. And this went on to say, in fact, the MBA Purchase Application Index is now the lowest that it has been since 1995. Overall, the rate of home ownership in the United States has fallen for 8 years in a row. And a new study shows that average households in 24 of America's 25 largest metropolitan areas cannot afford to pay for the average price new car or truck. 50% of all Americans now have subprime credit at this point. Well, that kind of makes sense because in 2008, people lost their jobs, they lost their homes, they couldn't pay for their cars, and guess what? Their credit completely went away. I mean, their credit numbers completely imploded on itself. So we can see why those people wouldn't be buying homes or cars, even though they opened up the loans to subprime borrowers. Most of the people don't even have the money to even make those payments. 56% of all Americans, I already said that, 60% of the jobs that have been created since the end of the last recession pay $13.83 or less an hour. Again, most of the people that had to go find jobs are not working one job anymore. They're working more than one. So realistically, we are in really bad shape. And when this thing comes apart, it is going to hit the American people really hard. Because think about it, back in 2008, Americans lost about 38% of their wealth. What do you think it's going to be this time? It's going to be much, much worse. Now, we understand that foreign countries and foreigners own treasuries. They own the debt of the United States. And what we've been seeing is that foreigners sell a record amount, over $100 billion worth of treasuries. And we understand that China has been dumping the treasuries, but there are other foreign nations doing it right now. Who are they? It's unclear at this time. But in a report just released for the week ending March 12th, treasuries held in custody by the Fed dropped to $2.855 trillion, a drop of $104 billion. This was the biggest drop of treasuries held by the Fed on record for foreign treasuries. So the question is it China, is it Russia, or other nations that are saying, you know what, we don't want to hold on to these anymore because we see what is happening economically in the United States, and we don't want to be holding this when the whole thing starts to implode. Okay, now let's move on to Obamacare. And people who've been listening to me, they know what I think about Obamacare. It is a complete cash grab. They just wanted taxes. They did not want to provide health insurance for the people. And of course, everything that President Obama said about Obamacare was completely false. And it was always the opposite of what he said. I guess he didn't read his own bill. Because he seems a little confused. And again, most of the people didn't read the Affordable Care Act. They just passed it. And again, we can see how this is turning out. It is a complete disaster. But right now, Obama says, you know what? Okay, I'm going to have to admit that you might have to change your doctor. You might not be able to keep him or her at this time, and you might have to find someone else at this time. Just like he said you can keep your insurance, all of this is turning out to be completely false and fake, because their plan was to get everybody in, and for those people who were hesitant about getting in, they were going to hit them with taxes and penalties to push them into insurance. And guess what? The people just don't have the money. If you don't have the money and you're just getting by, paying for food, rent, and fuel, insurance is the last thing you're going to do at this time, especially the young generation. Most of them are very healthy, and it's the last thing that they're thinking about. And that was the last thing that I was thinking about when I was coming out of college, looking for work, didn't have health insurance. I was no longer on my parents' policy. I didn't give two thoughts about getting insurance. I thought about, oh, I want to get a car. I want to get, a place to live. And that's what I was doing at that time. And I'm sure most of them are like, I just want to get a good paying job at this time. Now, quietly, it seems like the White House might have removed the individual mandate. And this goes on to say that the mandate that requires every American to purchase health insurance, or if you don't purchase health insurance, you have to pay that, penalty, the tax to the IRS, could have quietly been removed. The Wall Street Journal reported this week that the Health and Human Services Administration deliberately buried in an unrelated regulation a rule that further delays the individual mandate, specifically the one that had to do with hardship exemption until 2016. For those who had their previous policies canceled because of Obamacare, they now have the ability to extend it, and all you have to do to get the hardship exemption is fill out a form attesting that your plan was canceled and that you believe that the plan options available in the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare marketplace in your area are more expensive than your canceled health insurance policy. And again, they are more expensive. Everyone's waking up and starting to realize this, that they've been bamboozled, that they've been tricked, that everything that they've been saying is completely false and the opposite. And I've always said this, every time the government tells you, or the Fed, or any type of official is telling you it's better for you, it is always the opposite. It is never better for you. It is better for them and for the government and for the central bankers. And this is why it's been working all along, and this is why this never works out. Now, we understand that the NSA, needs to spy on every single American, and this is what they've been doing. We understand that they intercepted computers and they inserted spyware and other software onto the computers. But what we're seeing right now is that looks like NSA is going to, which they wanted to do, is they wanted to infect millions of computers. And this goes on to say that the NSA wanted to infect millions of computers with malware, and the National Security Agency impersonated popular social network site Facebook. According to documents leaked by Edward Snowden, the clandestine initiative enabled the NSA to break into targeted computers and to siphon out data from foreign internet and phone networks. And the Facebook exploit was called Quantum Hand, and the NSA planned to spread it to millions of computers around the globe using an automated system known internally as Turbine. Turbine gave members of the NSA tailored access operations unit the ability to tap into or destroy computers on a massive scale. These are what these documents show. And again, we understand that the NSA is not looking for terrorists. They're keeping track. They're spying on Americans. They're spying on government officials. They're using it to blackmail people. They're keeping track of everyone and what they're doing. They're looking to steal patent ideas. They're looking to steal investment ideas. And they're looking to make sure that all the Americans are they're not a threat against the powers of the government. And if they are, you go on a list. That list is then handed out to DHS. It's put through their fusion center and uploaded to other databases. You're put on the no-fly list. And this is what all of this is all about. This has nothing to do with finding terrorists whatsoever. Now, we've been hearing in Crimea that people are worried. They're making a run on the banks, and they've been showing pictures. I don't know if you've seen them, pictures, people standing out in line to get their money. Capital controls have been put into effect. They're only allowed to take out about 1,500 of the Ukrainian currency, and right now, the reason for this is because people are very worried about what's going on. They're worried about how the financial system will work if Crimea severs ties with the mainland Ukraine. The details are very sketchy. Officials said there were plans to use the Russian ruble alongside the Ukrainian currency. People got very worried about this. They started making runs on the bank. They had to put capital controls into effect and only allowing certain money coming out of there. And again, I would be worried too. I would most likely probably run to the bank because they're in a situation where everything's up in the air. They're in limbo. They don't know what's going on. And again, I would want my money in my hands because I saw what happened in Cyprus, and I don't want the same thing happening here in the Ukraine, and that's what these people are probably thinking. Now, Russia continually and has always been saying that they're not going to interfere with Crimea. Moscow's ambassador has reconfirmed that Russia does not want any escalation of the Ukraine crisis, and they are not going to interfere whatsoever with the upcoming referendum in Crimea. Churkin assured the international community that the Black Sea Fleet, the only Russian military force stationed in Crimea, according to existing international agreements, does not and will not interfere with Sunday's referendum on Crimean succession. And we understand in March 16th, they're going to have the referendum to see if Crimea completely splits apart from Ukraine. And again, John Kerry is out there and he's saying if Crimea goes ahead with their referendum, John Kerry said that they're going to impose sanctions on Russia. Now, of course, the Crimean people are making this decision. They created the Declaration of Independence. They're deciding to do this, but the sanctions are going to be put on Russia. Interesting. So Secretary of State John Kerry emphasized talk of possible sanctions against Russia are not a threat or meant in a personal way towards Russian President Putin. I don't know. If somebody tells me I can't take my money or I can't travel or all my assets are frozen, how do you take that if it's not a threat? Or how do you take it not personally? I mean, think about it. If the government enacted the bail-in documents and they froze your accounts, you can't take out your money, how would you take that? I would say it's a threat to your well-being in surviving. So what he's saying is absolutely ridiculous. But, of course, he came up with politician babble, and he came out and he said, it is meant as a matter of respect for the international multilateral structure that we have lived by since World War II, and for the standards of behavior about annexation, about secession, about independence, and how countries come about it. Which, what does that even mean? So, I mean, you can see what's happening here. Their backs are against the wall. They don't know what else to do. They need to do something. They're trying to provoke Russia into doing something in Ukraine. The central banker's goal is the same as it has always been, to start war. And we can see what is happening at this time. Now, listen, Russia said if you impose sanctions on us, there'll be some type of boomerang effect. And of course, you know, they can dump their treasuries, they can remove their reserves, they can make other countries go along with them and not make them, but they're partnering and supporting Russia. And China could say, you know what, we're going to dump our treasuries, we're going to dump our reserves, and they can, you know, decimate the economy of the United States. But there are other things that they can do, and there are other boomerang effects. Russia arms sales to China could go hog wild. They can start selling the Russian Su-35 and advanced conventional submarines to China. If the Ukraine situation gets worse, Moscow goes all in on natural resource sales to Beijing. They can create large deals, and China, you know, could purchase Russian oil, natural gas, and any other natural resources it can get its hands on. Russian arms sales to Iran could go forward, even though with the P5+1 deal moving forward, Moscow could seek to make trouble for Washington and its allies by rebooting arms sales to Iran. Again, Russia could start sending in arms to Syria. Russia may have offered more weapons to Syria and help Assad really beat down the rebels and remove them from Syria. And again, they can even take this one step further. Russia could start taking large sections of eastern Ukraine, and they can be making it completely Russian. And then what would that mean? That means Washington would be forced to consider beefing up its security commitments in Europe. So we can see there are many different things that Russia could do with China, with Iran, with Syria, and it seems like it's almost where the United States is dealing with at this time, because they want to remove Assad from government. They want to get into the banking system or remove the government of Iran. The China is a direct threat to the dollar, and Russia is a direct threat to the United States in Ukraine, and Russia backs Syria and Iran. So, I mean, this is all coming full circle at this time. Now, we understand that both countries are having drills right now, and the U.S. Army is going to lead a NATO military exercise in Ukraine. The U.S. and its allies chose to go ahead with its exercise in Ukraine while canceling the one in Russia, and this demonstrates Western support for Kiev since they've been having this confrontation with Russia. The exercise near the Polish border is to promote regional stability and security, strengthen partnership and capacity, and they're going and moving forward with these drills. And at the same time, we understand that the United States is keeping the fleet in the Mediterranean, so Russia right now is launching training flights over the Mediterranean Sea amid this whole Ukraine-Syrian standoff at this time. And we also have to remember that Russia is having a drill along the Ukraine border. They have about 8,000 troops. And again, there's drills happening all over. And I know everyone's saying, oh, they're massing troops along the border. They invaded Crimea. But again, the same thing's happening on the other side. A destroyer was brought into the Black Sea. There are 3 warships from the United States in the Black Sea. F-16s were delivered to Poland and Lithuania. They have AWACS up in the air monitoring the whole situation. There's troop buildups and drills going on every single place. There's drills from the United States and other nations in the Black Sea at this time. So both sides are flexing muscles. Both sides are showing, yes, we have military force, and we will be ready to do anything if something should happen. Now, there was a drone that was intercepted in Crimea. An American scout attack drone was intercepted in Crimea, and judging by the side markings, the MQ-5B drone was part of the 66th U.S. Brigade of Military Intelligence with the main location in Bavaria, and they brought it down. And how did they bring this down? Well, as you know, it is easy to hack into the control systems of these drones, and the drone was at the height of about 4,000 meters and was practically invisible from Earth, and it was possible to break the drone's link with its American operators with the help of electronic warfare complex, and as a result the device made an emergency landing and passed into the possession of the self-defense forces almost unbroken in Crimea. So right now they have this drone and it is there. Now, we understand that the United States wants Assad out. They've been trying everything to remove him. Now they are ramping up forces. They're building the military assets to make a strike into Syria, and we're going to see this happen in the next couple of weeks. And because they are in a short time frame, because we understand that the mid-year elections are coming up mid-year of this year. So the Syrian parliament approved a new election law, and it allows other people to run for election against Assad, but you have to be Syrian, and you have to be living in Syria for 10 years to be nominated to run for president. So this new law was instated, so any of these rebel forces who want to take over, they cannot, because most of them, as we all know, are not Syrian. They are paid mercenaries. They are people from all other countries paid to go in there and push out Assad. And of course, this hasn't been happening, and this is why we had this incident back in August of 2013 that didn't really turn out to do anything, because the people of America were not for it. They couldn't prove anything, and everyone realized that, you know what, I think this is a false flag event. I don't believe that Assad used chemical weapons on his own people. Now, Iran and Russia, they are finalizing their trade deal soon, and they're going through a final agreement, and they have reached for broader economic and trade cooperation. And also you have to remember Russia has also made deals with Egypt, has also made deals with Syria, and again, China is also doing the same thing all throughout the Middle East and Africa and in Afghanistan. And we can see this is happening every place. Now, we understand the whole conflict in Ukraine, and right now they're reporting that several Russian state TV channels have been hit by a large cyber attack suspected to partly come from Kiev. Remember, the Kiev government there was shutting down all Russian TV channels. Well, I guess they decided to hit it with a cyber attack and just bring them all down. And again, do we know where these attacks come from exactly? Not really, because they can bounce them off servers. But in this instance, we can kind of tell who actually did it. Also, the Russian president's site was brought down, and we can see that they are pushing this agenda forward, and they're making it very difficult, and they're hitting different areas with cyber attacks at this time. Now, in the UK, which I find very interesting, in a World War II era bunker beneath London's streets, dozens of young computer experts are racing to understand why Britain's banking networks suddenly seem to have gone offline. Now, this is a training exercise that they are doing right now, and it is meant to help light the threat many here see is as inevitable: a major cyber attack on the nation's critical infrastructure and financial institutions. So we understand that they are definitely planning to bring down the entire system, because they understand the economy cannot go on and it is collapsing, and it is better to blame it on another country than to have the blame on them. And when I say them, I'm talking about the central bankers and the government officials. And this is why we are seeing this at this time. And General Hayden was out there, and he was explaining cybersecurity threats that may affect both private industry and government entities. He explained that cybersecurity threats and emphasized that government entities, businesses, and individuals will need to take steps to prepare and defend themselves against these attacks. Now, what are we seeing? Well, we understand that over the past 3 years or so, they've been telling us that cyber attacks have been coming from the Chinese, cyber attacks have been coming from the Syrians, cyber attacks coming from Iran, from Russia, and North Korea. And again, in the last couple of months, we've been seeing attacks from the Syrian Electronic Army. And again, a new attack from the Syrian Electronic Army just hit, and what they are saying is that they compromised U.S. Central Command, and they have some top secret documents from CENTCOM. And this is again from their Twitter feed. And again, anybody can create a Twitter account and call it whatever they want. And as of March 14, 2014, they tweeted, "In the coming days, we will update you with the specific details of hundreds of documents that the Syrian Electronic Army has obtained." And again, does the Syrian Electronic Army actually exist? And what would be the motive of Assad right now to start cyber attacking the United States? He's already made the deal to get rid of the chemical weapons. He wants the rebels out of his country. What benefit does this give him? What benefit does it give the United States that we believe that these attacks are coming from the Syrian Electronic Army? That is a whole different story. Now, there was another report out there talking about the U.S. power grid. And again, we are seeing many of these reports, and we know for a fact that all of us are going to need to be prepared for when the lights go out. And this report goes on to say the entire U.S. power grid could be shut down for more than a month if just 9 of the over 55,000 electric substations placed throughout the nation were sabotaged by terrorists. 9 out of the 55,000. You think that dry run in California was done on purpose? I do. A study of the Federal Energy Regulation Commission found that just a handful of American substations provide much of the electricity that flows to large swaths of the country. Disabling just 9 of these substations could leave much of the country without power for weeks or even months. So right now, what are we seeing? They are preparing all of us. Janet Napolitano, as she was leaving DHS, we have to keep reminding ourselves she did not say if, but when. They had the Grid 2, and guess what? They are learning. They have learned how to bring down the entire system. They've done this because they want to blame the entire collapse on another country. And this is why we're seeing this all come about right now. And this goes on to say that the power grid, built over many decades in a benign environment, now faces a range of threats it was never designed to survive. And they are making us believe, and they're continually doing this, they're making us believe that it will be coming from another country. And again, we are definitely going to see this. And I just wanted to say that when this happens, those people who do not have prep, who haven't been prepping, are going to be in quite a bit of trouble. And this is why you should have been prepping all along. And if you haven't, I would start with food, water, batteries, toiletries. And again, if you have some type, if you're diabetic, if you have a heart condition or anything like this, I would get extra medication at this time. And I've said this many times, but we need to make sure that we are safe, because what's going to happen, you want to protect your family, because what's going to happen is those people who haven't been preparing are this is going to take them by surprise. They are not going to they're not going to understand what's happening. And let me just say, my brother-in-law lives in Long Island. He was there during the hurricane when the power went out. He lives along the water, and he said it was the scariest time he has ever had. Everything was pitch dark, and at night all he heard, and he doesn't own any type of weapon, he had a bat. All he heard were windows breaking, people breaking into homes. He heard people going up and down the streets, and they were in the house, dark, with their candles, with their bats, ready to protect the family if someone came in. And he said it was very disturbing, and when the lights go out here, it is going to be much worse, because food delivery, people won't be able to get money out, and this is going to go on for not 3 days, not 4 days, weeks or months at a time. And again, this is not going to turn out well. And I just want to make one note on this Malaysian airliner that disappeared. There was a very interesting article on AmericanBlog.com. There is a small island about 2,000 miles or so away from where the airline kind of disappeared. It's called Diego Garcia, and there is a runway strip there. And I think what's happening here is that this plane actually didn't go down. I think it was hijacked. I think it was taken to another place, maybe for one or two reasons. One, maybe to strip it down and sell the parts. Or the other, I think this is going to be used in a terrorist type of attack later on. And again, I have this article on my site, on the X22Report.com site. Just go to the episode, The Next False Flag Will Black Out Most of the Country. Click on that link, go to the bottom, and you'll see the maps and everything on there. And again, it seems like the corporate media is completely pointing us in the wrong direction. They're pointing us to Sri Lanka, where there's known terrorists there, and they might have taken the plane, and they might be using it for a terrorist attack later on. And I believe that is true, but I don't believe that's where it's coming from. I believe this is going to be set up and used for some type of false flag event. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.